All right, class. So this is why the Earth is in fact a donut and not a sphere. NASA is lying. Remember that. This is going to be on the test. Any questions? Yes, teach. This is all very nice, but what about the lesson? I thought we were learning quadratics. Oh yeah, sorry. Forget everything I said. This is against what the district wants me to teach you. All right, class. So today we're learning about the quadratic formula. Well, what is the quadratic formula? It is a formula, that solves quadratics. Yeah. So we need to learn the rules of the quadratic formula before we actually do it. So rule number 1 is to set your equation to 0. If you don't do that, it's going to go completely wrong and you're going to end up like me. You don't want that. Step 2 is identify your A, B, and C, which are the different parts of the equation that we plug into the quadratic formula. Identify A, B, C. And then step 3 is just plug it in. Plug everything into the quadratic formula the way it says to be done, and just stick it in your calculator and you'll get an answer. Also, don't forget that there's usually 2 solutions, so you're going to need to reverse the plus part. I'll show you that. Plug in numbers. Alright, so our first example is 25x squared minus 18x equals 12x minus 9. So if you remember our rules, we need to first set the quadratic to equal 0. And to do that, we're going to move all these numbers over here to over here. So the first thing we're going to need to do is add 9 on both sides. So plus 9, which gives us 25x squared minus 18x plus 9 equals 12x. Now the next thing we're going to need to do is move the 12x over here. So we're going to subtract the 12x from both sides, which now gives us 25x squared minus 30x plus 9 equals 0. So now that it's set to equal, we need to identify our A, B, and C. So our A equals 25. Our B equals negative 30. And then our C equals positive 9. All right, now that we have our values, we need to plug them into the quadratic formula, which is opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a, which, plugging these numbers, will give us 30 plus or minus square root of, be sure you put them in parentheses, otherwise it's going to mess up in your calculator. Parentheses, negative 30, close parentheses, that's important, otherwise it's going to screw it up. Squared minus 4 times 25 times 9 over 2 times 25. And then you're just going to plug this right into your equation. First time with the plus, and then the second time with the minus, and those are going to be your solutions. Okay. So, x. Yo, teach, what if we got the same solution both times we plugged it in? Yeah, that means it's a one solution. Go and plug that equation into your graph and you'll see what I mean. That means that it only touches the x-axis once. So it looks like this. It's not like a typical graph, which is like this or like this, where it touches 2 times. It's only once. So what was the answer? 3/5. That's correct. The answer is 3/5, or rather, x equals 3/5. That is the only time that this graph intersects the x-axis.
Sir, how is this different from factoring?
That's a great question. Factoring gives you the factors of the equation, which are the two things that you multiply to get your quadratic, while the quadratic formula gives you the solutions, or the x-intercepts of your quadratic. So for example, when you factor something, factoring a quadratic, so 2x plus 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. So to factor, you have to multiply these two numbers, which gets you 30, and find the factors of 30 that add up to 13, which are 3 and 10. So, and then you have to put them however you like with this to get, a good, easy thing to do. So 2x squared plus 10x plus 3x plus 15. And then you have to put parentheses around this thing, which kind of turns them into the factors because you're multiplying these two. And you have to find the greatest common factor, which is which factor, what thing that is multiplied to another thing that both of these numbers share in common, which in this case, it's 2x, because they both have an x, and 10 is divisible by 2. So it's 2x times x gets you 2x squared, so that's what you put in the parentheses, plus 5, because 2 times 5 equals 10. And then, because this is a plus sign, if it was a minus, you put a minus sign. So plus 3x plus 15. So what factor do 3 and 15 have in common? 3. So you get a plus 3. And then on the inside of the parentheses, it's x plus 5. And as you see, both of these are the exact same, which if they're not, you done goofed, all right? You don't want that. You want them to be the same. And then you pretty much, these give you your factors. So one factor is this, and the other one is just what's in the parentheses. So your factors are 2x plus 3 and x plus 5. Now these are the factors. To get the solution, you'd have to set both of these equal to 0, which in x plus 5, which gives you x equals negative 5. And in 2x plus 3 gives you x equals negative 3 over 2. And those are your solutions. If you plug this in directly in the quadratic formula, you'd get these. So any questions?
Shut up, Teach.
Ah! Class dismissed. Class dismissed. All right, class. We have a test today. Be sure you always put your numbers in parentheses when plugging into the calculator. And don't forget to check your answers by plugging in your quadratics into the y equals feature on your calculator. So, any questions before we start? Yes, teacher. Exactly how do we check our answers? So yes, if you remember yesterday's example of 25x squared minus 30x plus 9, this is obviously after it was set equal to 0 because I'm just explaining to you how to check it. After you plug this into the quadratic formula, you obviously get, as you remember, 30 plus or minus square root of negative 30 squared minus 4 times 25 times 9, all over 2 times 25. And then you just plug this in one time with the plus sign, one time with the minus sign into your calculator, and then you should get 3/5 both times. But how are you sure it's 3/5? Well, you just take this equation and plug it into y1 in the y equals section. So you just hit y equals on your calculator, and then in y equals y1, you just plug in 25x squared minus 30x plus 9. And then you should get a graph that looks something similar to this and this. Only intersects it one time, because there's only one answer. And you can go over to this spot, highlight it, and it'll tell you 3/5, or the decimal equivalent of 3/5. Any other questions? Yes, sir? Oh, what is the difference between the quadratic formula and factoring, and when should we use which one? Great question. So the quadratic formula is best used for equations like this, with big A's and just large numbers in general, because it directly finds your solution. X equals 3/5 in this case, which if the question's asking for the factors, you probably have to figure out how this, which is a whole headache, and you could probably just do factoring. And factoring, that directly finds your factors, which I personally recommend that you use on equations either without an A, as in A equals 1, or just small numbers in general, because it's like easier and you'll be able to convert your factors into the solution. But it's all up to personal preference in the end. It's whatever you want to use, however you feel, all that kind of stuff. Alright? So, let's begin the test. Okay, so everybody done with the test? I hope all of you learned a lot about quadratic formulas and even factor. Have a great day.
Tests are for losers.